The medal appeared on stage. And Simon Cowell lost his voice. The America's Got Talent stage. The iconic red backdrop. The judge's desk. The packed audience buzzing with anticipation. Another Tuesday night audition round. Another group of hopefuls waiting to perform for their shot at fame. A young man walked onto the stage. Late 20s. Jeans and a simple button-down shirt. No costume. No props. No instrument. Just nervous energy radiating from every step. Host Terry Crews greeted him with his usual enthusiasm. "Welcome to America's Got Talent. What's your name and where are you from?" "My name is Kyle Morrison," the young man said, his voice quieter than the microphone could comfortably carry. "I'm from Fort Worth, Texas. And what will you be doing for us today, Kyle?" Kyle didn't answer immediately. Instead, he reached into his jeans pocket and pulled something out. Something small that caught the stage lights and glinted gold and red and blue. A military medal. Suspended from a ribbon. The unmistakable shape of a bronze star. He held it up toward the judge's table. "Before I do anything," Kyle said, his voice cracking slightly, "I need to find someone. And I think he's here tonight." Cameras were live when the young man on stage held up a military medal, and Simon Cowell had to stand up from the judge's desk because the medal's real owner was in the studio. Simon's entire body went rigid. His arms uncrossed from their usual skeptical position. His hands gripped the edge of the desk. That sharp, critical expression, the one that had become his trademark over decades of judging, vanished completely. Howie Mandel leaned forward, squinting at what Kyle was holding. Is that a bronze star?" Kyle nodded, tears already forming in his eyes. "It belonged to my father, Staff Sergeant David Morrison. He earned it in Iraq in 2007. He died in 2009. And this medal, it's been missing for 15 years. The audience fell into absolute silence. 300 people suddenly understanding they were witnessing something far beyond a talent audition. Simon stood up. Not casually. Not as part of some planned moment. He stood because something in his body simply demanded it. His mouth opened as if to speak, but no sound came out. Terry Crews, sensing the moment spiraling beyond normal show protocol, stepped closer to Kyle. "Kyle, maybe you should explain what's happening here." "My father's bronze star was stolen," Kyle said, his voice steadier now, speaking to the audience as much as to the judges. "After he died, my mother kept all his military honors in a display case in our living room. In 2010, our house was broken into. They took electronics, jewelry, and they took my father's medals. All of them. The bronze star, his purple heart, his service ribbons. Everything." Kyle's hand trembled as he held the medal higher. "I was 14 years old. And losing those medals felt like losing my father all over again. We filed police reports. We searched pawn shops. We put up flyers. Nothing. They were just gone." Simon finally found his voice. "How did you get that medal?" His tone wasn't sharp or critical. It was barely above a whisper. 3 weeks ago, Kyle said, a man contacted me through Facebook. He said he'd bought a box of military items at an estate sale in Houston. When he got home and opened it, he found this medal. My father's name was engraved on the back. He looked me up, found me, and drove 4 hours to Fort Worth to return it. Kyle's voice broke completely. He wouldn't take any money. He just said, "This belongs with his family?" His name is Robert Chin. And when I told him I was coming to audition for AGT, he said he never missed an episode. So I asked the producers if there was any way he could be here tonight. Because I wanted to thank him. In front of everyone. The way he deserves. Simon stopped the show. No one knew what was happening. Simon walked out from behind the judge's desk. The cameras followed him. The control room erupted into confused chatter. Producers shouting into headsets, director asking what was happening, nobody knowing whether to cut to commercial. Simon walked to the edge of the stage, looking up at Kyle. "The man who returned your father's medal. Robertson. He's here?" Kyle nodded, scanning the audience. "He's supposed to be. The producers got him a ticket. I don't know where he's sitting, but right here." The voice came from the front row. An older man, maybe 70, wearing a Navy veteran's cap, was standing up. His hand was shaking as he raised it slightly. Robertson. The man who'd driven 4 hours to return a stolen medal to a stranger. The audience around him erupted, not in applause yet, but in that collective gasp that happens when 300 people simultaneously realize they're watching something profound. Simon looked at Robert, then back at Kyle. "Come down here," he said to Kyle. Not a suggestion. A command. "Bring the medal." Kyle walked down the stage steps, the bronze star clutched in his hand. Simon met him at the base of the stage, then together they walked into the audience to where Robert stood. The cameras scrambled to follow. Terry Crews joined them, microphone in hand, understanding his role had shifted from host to witness. Robertson was crying. 70 years old, wearing his service cap, tears streaming down his weathered face. Kyle stopped directly in front of him. "Mr. Chen," Kyle said, his voice thick with emotion. "I came on this show because I wanted to sing. I wanted to perform. But when I got here, I realized that wasn't the most important thing I needed to do tonight." He held up the bronze star, letting it catch the lights, letting everyone in the theater see it clearly. "You gave me back my father. You gave me back the only physical proof I have that he was a hero. You drove 4 hours to a stranger's house to do the right thing. And you wouldn't take anything in return." Kyle's hands were shaking so badly he could barely hold the medal steady. "So I wanted to do this here. In front of all these people. In front of Simon Cowell and these judges I've watched my whole life. I wanted everyone to know what you did." He stepped forward and hugged Robertson. The older man wrapped his arms around Kyle and sobbed into his shoulder, loud, body-shaking sobs that the boom microphones caught with devastating clarity. Simon stood 3 feet away, his arms crossed again but not in his usual judgmental stance. His jaw was clenched. His eyes were wet. Simon Cowell, the man famous for crushing dreams and delivering harsh truths, was openly crying on live television. Subscribe and leave a comment, because the most powerful part of this performance is still ahead. To understand what happened next, you need to understand Robert Chen's story. And more importantly, you need to understand why a bronze star meant so much to him. Robert was born in 1954 in San Francisco to Chinese immigrant parents. He grew up working in his family's restaurant, dreaming of something bigger. At 18, he enlisted in the Navy. Vietnam was winding down, but the Cold War was hot, and young men like Robert signed up because they believed in service. He served for 6 years. Never saw combat. Never earned medals. He was a mechanic on a carrier, fixing engines, keeping planes flying. Important work, but not the kind that gets you ribbons or recognition. When he came home in 1978, there were no parades. No thank yous. The country was tired of war, tired of veterans, tired of being reminded. Robert went back to his family's restaurant, married his high school sweetheart, raised 3 kids, and never talked much about his service. He'd made peace with it. He'd served honorably, even if nobody noticed. That was enough. But something had always bothered him. He'd never done anything truly heroic. Never saved a life. Never earned a medal. Never had that one moment where he proved his service mattered. In 2024, at 70 years old, retired and widowed, Robert had started going to estate sales. Something to do. Something to fill the days. He'd buy boxes of old books, vintage tools, random items that caught his eye. At an estate sale in Houston, he bought a cardboard box for $5. Military patches, some old dog tags, random service ribbons. He figured he'd sort through it, maybe donate whatever was usable to a veterans organization. At home that evening, at the bottom of the box, wrapped in tissue paper, he found the bronze star. He turned it over. Engraved on the back, SSG David Morrison, 2007. Robert had sat at his kitchen table, holding that medal for an hour, just staring at it. He knew what a Bronze Star meant. Heroic or meritorious achievement. Combat valor. The kind of medal Robert had spent 6 years in service never earning. And someone had stolen it. Taken it from a family who'd lost their hero. Sold it like it was nothing. Robert Chin had cried that night. For David Morrison, who'd earned this medal and never came home. For the family who'd lost both the man and the symbol of his service. For himself, for the recognition he never received. Then he'd gone to his computer and started searching. David Morrison. Bronze Star. 2007, Iraq. It took him 3 days to find Kyle Morrison on Facebook. 3 days of cross-referencing obituaries, military records, and social media. When he messaged Kyle, he'd been terrified. What if Kyle thought he'd stolen it? What if Kyle didn't believe him? What if this opened old wounds? Kyle's response had come within an hour. Is this real? Do you really have my father's medal? They talked on the phone for 2 hours that night. Kyle told him about his father. How David had been a Little League coach, how he'd deployed 3 times, how he'd died not in combat but in a training accident 2 years after earning the Bronze Star. How losing the medals had destroyed Kyle's mother, who'd passed away from cancer in 2019 without ever seeing them again. Robert had driven to Fort Worth the next day. 4 hours. He'd handed Kyle the medal at a Starbucks, and Kyle had opened the small box with shaking hands and broken down completely. How much do I owe you? Kyle had asked. Nothing. Robert had said. This belongs with you. The estate's sale, you paid for the box. Let me at least. No. Robert interrupted firmly. Some things aren't for sale. This is one of them. They'd stayed at that Starbucks for 3 hours, talking about David, about service, about what it meant to honor the fallen. When Kyle mentioned he was auditioning for AGT, Robert had lit up. I watch that show every week. Have for years. Would you want to come? Kyle had asked impulsively. If I make it to the audition round? I'd love for you to be there. Robert had nodded, not knowing that Kyle had a plan far bigger than just singing a song. Backstage, producers were begging him to continue, but he didn't. In the audience, still holding Kyle, Robert finally pulled back. His face was streaked with tears, his service cap slightly askew. Kyle was crying just as hard. Simon stepped forward. He looked at Robert, then at the Bronze Star still clutched in Kyle's hand. Mr. Chin, Simon said, his voice rough. May I see the medal? Kyle handed it to Simon. The entire theater watched as Simon Cowell, famously critical, notoriously harsh, held a fallen soldier's Bronze Star with a reverence usually reserved for sacred objects. He turned it over, reading the engraving. Staff Sergeant David Morrison. 2007, Iraq. Simon looked at Robert. You served? Navy. 6 years. Never earned one of these. But you returned one. Simon said quietly. You could have kept it. Sold it. Done anything with it. But you spent 4 hours in a car to give it back to a stranger. It wasn't mine to keep. Robert said simply. Simon nodded slowly. He looked at the other judges, Howie, Heidi, Sophia, all watching with tears in their eyes. Then he looked at Terry Crews, who'd served in the military himself and was barely holding it together. Kyle, Simon said, you came here to audition. To sing. Are you still going to? Kyle wiped his face. I don't know if I can. This is bigger than any song I could sing. You're right, Simon said. It is. He walked back to the judge's desk. The cameras followed. The audience held its breath. Simon stood behind his chair for a long moment, the Bronze Star still in his hand. Then he pressed the golden buzzer. Golden confetti exploded across the theater. The audience erupted. Screaming, crying, standing as one. But Simon wasn't finished. He walked back to Robert and Kyle, still standing in the audience. He handed the Bronze Star back to Kyle, then removed his own watch, an expensive piece he wore every show. "Mr. Chin," Simon said, pressing the watch into Robert's hands, "you said some things aren't for sale. You're right. But some things need to be honored. You gave this young man back his father's legacy. This is nothing compared to that, but I want you to have it. To remember that what you did mattered." Robert tried to refuse, but Simon closed the man's fingers around the watch. "Keep it. Please. Share and subscribe, so this story will never be forgotten." Kyle never performed that night. He didn't need to. The golden buzzer wasn't for talent, it was for humanity. Simon later said it was the most important buzzer he'd ever pressed. Robert Chin kept Simon's watch. He wears it every day. Kyle had his father's Bronze Star professionally remounted with a plaque that reads, "Returned with honor by Robert Chin, a hero who never needed a medal." And Simon Cowell? He tells this story in every interview. "That night reminded me why we do this show. Not for the spectacle. For the moments when we remember what really matters." The medal came home. And so did the meaning of service.